past 8 weeks, we have been studying the theology of the body, which allows us to naturally move into our new topic, which is the sacrament of holy matrimony. And this will serve as the end of our larger discussion on the two sacraments of vocation, holy orders and holy matrimony. And we've been talking about this since early July. So this will mark the end of volume 6 of my educational homilies, which will eventually be made into books. Volume 1 was the Trinity, Volume 2 was the Church, and Volume 3, the Sacraments of Initiation, we'll have by Christmas. Hopefully it's almost finished. And then Part 4 is the Mass, Part 5 is the Sacraments of Healing, and Part 6, like I just said, is the Sacraments of Vocation. Volume 7 will be the end. So we're nearing the end of the whole project, probably by the summer of 2026, I would guess. That'll make it 3.5 years since I started in January of 2023, and I wasn't far off. I guess it'd take about 3 years. So anyways, before we jump right into the sacrament of holy matrimony, I think it would be good to review the general concept of what a vocation is. After all, it's been since, like I said, the beginning of July that we actually talked about vocation in general. As I said back then, there are two sacraments of vocation, the sacrament of holy orders and the sacrament of holy matrimony, commonly referred to as the priesthood and marriage. The word vocation means a calling from God. It's essentially, a vocation is God's plan for your life. And on the one hand, we all have the same vocation, and that is to get to heaven. But on the other hand, there is also our individual vocation, which is God's specific plan for you to get to heaven. And if we view life from that perspective, it paints vocation in a different light. If God's plan for you is to get to heaven, then the entire point of marriage is to get you to heaven. The point of the priesthood is for the priest to get himself to heaven. And he brings others along with him, just like married couples bring others with them. The point of every vocation is to get yourself and others to heaven. And God has given us certain sacraments that provide divine help to do just that. Graces to live out the vocation that God has given to us. We talked about how this happens in the priesthood months ago from like July to August. But in the sacrament of marriage, graces are given to two individuals to be able to love a particular person as a living sign of Christ's love for his church. And that's a very difficult thing to do without God's help. But God loves us, and he enters into our lives at certain moments to help us be the spouses that we were created to be, and that's why God gives us the sacraments to offer his help. And one of those sacraments is, of course, marriage. And I've saved marriage for the last of the 7 sacraments. We've covered all the other ones up to now, because for me, marriage is the most beautiful of the 7. It was a very, very difficult thing for me to realize that marriage was not God's plan for me. And so I want to begin this topic of holy matrimony by going over the more practical aspects of marriage today. How does one get married in the Catholic Church? What are the steps? What are the requirements? And so I'm going to sort of outline the current marriage prep process that is used by the Diocese of Lincoln. And I say current because it's supposed to change in January, but don't tell the bishop I'm not changing it. So I'm completely opposed to the new version. It basically takes the responsibility completely out of the priest's hands and gives it to members of the parish. The idea is, the engaged couple are more integrated in the parish by getting to know another married couple. I think everybody knows, pretty much everybody here in these small towns. And I can see why pastors in bigger parishes in cities like Lincoln would welcome this change, because when I was in Lincoln, I was prepping 15 to 20 couples all at the same time. And there's literally not enough time in the day to do that on a case-by-case basis, so you just lump them all together in one big class and you don't get to know them anyways. But in a smaller parish like this one, I found that working with young couples is no doubt the best way for a pastor to get to know young couples and to get to know their parish. And I fear that the main impetus for this change is because A, priests are overworked, B, priests don't have the confidence or the ability to talk about the birds and the bees, and C, which is scariest to me, they don't enjoy teaching or catechizing. I'm sure your next pastor, whoever that'll be, will do things the way that Lincoln wants him to, but I'd rather get to know the young couples in our parish. They're the future of our parish, of course, and so they deserve to be heard and known by their pastor. With all of that said, the content of the marriage prep essentially is the same from what I can tell versus what it's changing to in January. And so that's what we're going to look at today. The marriage prep process takes a minimum of 6 months from the time that the couple contacts the priest or the church to the date of the wedding. There have been cases where I've had to speed that up, cases regarding citizenship and immigration, where you kind of have to just do the prep as quickly as possible, or I've done it in the case of a military deployment where there wasn't time where he was here before he went overseas. So I've had to speed up in those situations. But in ordinary circumstances, 6 months is the minimum. I would say most couples, usually it's 9 months to a year. They'll plan it out. The reason why we give this much time, why we just, we got engaged, can we get married tomorrow type thing? We don't do that because this is the rest of their lives that we're talking about. We're not planning a wedding, and I'm not a wedding planner. The goal is to educate the couple on the sacrament of marriage, what it means in the Catholic Church specifically, and to give them the communication and the problem-solving tools that will best equip them to approach marriage from the healthiest possible perspective. The world throws a lot at young people and young couples, and it's the church's job to put them in the best position possible to have a happy, healthy marriage. Or in some rare cases, this gives them the time, the 6 months gives them the time to discern that perhaps they shouldn't be getting married at all. Whenever a wedding is called off, I rejoice because it's going to save those two a lot of heartache. I've had this happen, just days before the wedding date. Better it happens before they're married than after. That's why we take the marriage prep process very seriously. After they get engaged, the couple contacts the priest to meet with them to go over the requirements that need to be met in order to get married in the Catholic Church. And this is basically what our first meeting is about. We gather information, and there's a checklist of things they'll need to be doing over the next 6 months or longer. But in our first meeting, we gather some information, how long they've been dating, where they're from, contact information, background, etc., religious background. And then we go over this checklist of things that needs to be done. And all of this document, or all this information, is kept in a document called the Marriage Preparation Record, which is right here. And it's bigger than you think it is. And this marriage prep record is kept in the parish where they get married, not necessarily where they do their wedding prep. So if you get married in Kearney or Lincoln or McCook, even if you did your marriage prep here with me in Cambridge, we would send this file to the parish where you're getting married. If they have been baptized, each person has to request a baptismal certificate from the church where they were baptized. And at least one of the two has to be baptized in order to get married in the Catholic Church. And one of them has to be Catholic in order to get married in the Catholic Church. You don't have to convert to Catholicism to get married in the Catholic Church, but one of you has to be Catholic. Another set of documents that are gathered during the marriage prep process are called affidavits of freedom to marry. In our diocese, they are this golden color for whatever reason. And what these are, this document is filled out during an interview with the priest and a close relative or a close friend, longtime friend of the bride and the groom. And they're very basic questions that the priest asks, how they're related to them, how long they've known them, what the religion of the person getting married is, should they be getting married, is there anything preventing them from being married, like they're not related to each other, that sort of thing. And the purpose of this interview is so that we have it on record that somebody else testifies that this couple is capable and ought to be married. And I always explain it this way, where I say, in the movies when the minister says, if anybody opposes this marriage, speak now or forever hold your peace. Well, we don't do that in the Catholic Church. We do the opposite. We ask the opposite question: should this couple get married? And that's what the affidavit of freedom to marry is. And both the bride and the groom need to have 2 of these affidavits for a total of 4. And usually it's, the parents or the grandparents of the bride and the groom. One of the most important parts of the marriage preparation process is when the couple attends what is called an engaged encounter weekend. And this is where the couple attends a weekend-long retreat, usually from Friday evening to Sunday afternoon, which focuses on the important aspects of marriage, communication skills, planning a family, the Catholic faith, and it's led by 2 married couples and a priest. And even though they're asked to spend a few $100s on this retreat and go all the way to the retreat house in Waverly, most couples, I don't know if they're lying or not, but most couples actually say that it was a very good experience for them. Mm-hmm. And for whatever reason, that always surprises me. And I think it just goes to show that young people are often starving when it comes to talking about things that really matter in life. In the secular world, the focus is often on superficial material things. So when the opportunity arises to really talk about life, it is a breath of fresh air to most people. The bulk of the meetings with the priest over the course of the 6 months are going to be centered around some classroom type meetings, some teaching sessions. In the first of these, we do a review of the main teachings of the Catholic faith, and it basically amounts to a 1-hour crash course on Catholicism, where we cover the Trinity, the person of Jesus, the sacraments, the church, heaven, hell, purgatory, Mary, and the saints, and we do that all in an hour, believe it or not. And then the other classes are where we actually dive deeper into the sacrament of marriage, where we talk about the sacrament itself, family life, natural family planning, and how to live the faith within the sacrament of marriage. And I can usually get that done in 3 or so 1-hour classes. In larger parishes, these teaching sessions were often done in, like I said, in large groups, all in a classroom. But in smaller parishes like ours, I always like to do them one-on-one in my living room, because it's far easier to get to know them, and it's a little bit cozier setting than an office or a classroom. After the couple has completed all the classes and they've done their engaged encounter, they do what is called a focus inventory. F-O-C-C-U-S, focus with 2 C's. And this inventory was actually invented by a religious sister from the Archdiocese of Omaha, but it's used all across the country by many different denominations, not just Catholic ones. And FOCUS stands for Facilitating Open Couple Communication, Understanding, and Study, which to me, it sounds like they just made up a bunch of words to make them fit into an acronym so they could sell it. But essentially, the FOCUS inventory, it looks an awful lot like a standardized test with even your bubble sheets where you fill in the answers. And it's not a test. It essentially is a series of statements that the couple either agrees with or disagrees with. They have a little booklet with all the statements in it. And the couple answers it separately from one another, and then we discuss the ones that they disagree on, or the ones that basically it's a tool to help us discuss the things that the couple hasn't talked about themselves or that we haven't covered in our classes. And this bubble sheet has 200 blanks on it. It usually ranges from 150 to 180 statements that you either agree with or disagree with. It depends on the couple and their background and their living situation. And the questions, even though in the order that they're asked, they don't, but when we go back and compare them, the questions fall into certain categories like family life, friend groups, communication, problem solving, spirituality and values, finances, etc. I think there's like 15 or 20 categories. Usually, taking the focus inventory and discussing it can be finished in 2 1-hour meetings. So all told, I meet with the couple 6 or 7 times before their wedding. And I always try to keep the meetings to around an hour because I value their time and I don't enjoy talking longer than that. And then on their own, and this involves a nurse or some kind of practitioner, on their own, they attend an introductory class to natural family planning, which we'll be talking about later. But it's also known as NFP, so this is a class where the couple learns more about being open to having children and how that works within the structure of the church. At some point in the marriage process, and this is something they do on their own, not with the priest, a couple needs to sign a marriage license before the date of the wedding. A couple can get a marriage license up to 6 months, I believe, before their wedding, and they can do it at any courthouse in the state, regardless of where they're getting married, as long as they're getting married in the state of Nebraska. I cannot legally perform a wedding in the state of Nebraska unless there is a marriage license that has been signed by the couple. And I'm sorry, I'm not going to go to jail for anybody. I always make this point exceedingly clear the very first time we meet. And that's because of experience. In my first assignment in David City, probably my first year of being a priest, so we're talking 16 years ago, the pastor was going to be out of town for a wedding of a couple that he had done all the prep work for. And so it fell to me to do the actual wedding ceremony. And the couple, they lived out of town. So apart from one meeting that we had ahead of their wedding, the only other time that I was ever going to see them was at the rehearsal the night before their wedding. So it was a little bit of an awkward situation, really the only time I've ever had to do that. On the afternoon of the rehearsal, I called the bride-to-be, and I told her, hey, when you come to the rehearsal tonight, just bring the marriage license with you. That way we can lock it in the church, and you don't have to worry. That's one less thing you have to worry about on your actual wedding day. And her response, her name is Allie, her response was, what marriage license? And immediately I started thinking in my head of contingency plans. Is there any way we can do like a fake wedding and then like do a secret actual real wedding later once we do have the marriage license? And when I explained to her that we couldn't have a wedding until they had a marriage license, she understandably burst into tears. And thankfully, her dad was an attorney that was at the courthouse every day, and she dragged her fiance away from his groomsmen off the golf course, and they went and they got their license. I'm glad I made that phone call. I don't know what I would have done. Ruined somebody's wedding. So that is the marriage prep process. All the steps, all the requirements, essentially. You may have, or you may not have noticed, that I usually try to tie these educational homilies back into the gospel reading for today. And most of the time it works out beautifully without me even really planning it. It just matches up with the gospel. But for the life of me, I cannot see many connections with this parable that we just heard. It's a bit of a stretch, but we're going to go with this. So Jesus tells the parable of the the unjust judge, the stubborn judge, who only delivers a verdict because of someone's persistent asking for a judgment. And let's just say, back when I was a brand new priest, I was mighty thankful that the judge, or whoever was in charge of issuing marriage license, wasn't stubborn. He only had to be asked once.